And we're live. Hello, everybody. We got some cool guests in the house. Julie, Lorenzo. We also have some alumni co-hosts as well. So I'm going to kick it off by having our co-hosts introduce themselves, the context on them in PilotCity, and why they have interest in this particular podcast in the city of Antioch. Ada, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hi, my name's Ada. I'm currently a senior at Clayton Valley Charter High School in Concord, but I live in Pittsburgh, so it's actually right next to Antioch. So I was a PilotCity participant last year, and I had an internship for Mayor Pauline Cutter and Congresswoman Barbara Lee. And my project was focused on digital equity for senior citizens. And so my partner and I developed a volunteer-based service to help senior citizens get groceries delivered to their house, eliminating any complicated technology and ensuring that the process is safe.
Excellent. Thank you, Ada. Hui.
Hello. You probably know me already. My name is Hui. I'm a sophomore at Antioch High, and I'm an alumni with PilotCity last year. Wait, now too. And my employer was MCE. So me and my team was the project was that to build a toolkit that teach high school students about CCAs and renewable energy. And we're currently building it, and we're about to pilot it next week.
That's a highly anticipated launch there, Owie. They've been working on it for quite some time now. I think almost at least 9 to 10 months, I would say.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
Hui?
it's around there. Yeah.
And you've also been meeting with Marin Clean Energy, I think either weekly or monthly or something like that, right?
Yeah, monthly. Yeah, once a month.
And that's very exciting. So, and so this definitely, related to our conversation here. Ada's work in government also is in public service. So we're going to have a good convo. And I think we also may have Tim and Tree from Antioch High School also join us in a little bit as well. So I think we all got connected here through, I think, the main culprit, I would call him. I think Jason Ebner, the teacher at Antioch High School, was the main connector of the dots here. And he got us on a conversation early on about probably a year ago. And Lorenzo was on the call, and we were talking about opportunities of how actually the different related projects and employers in our program could interconnect, right? And that's kind of how we first sparked up. Lorenzo, I don't know how we got connected afterwards. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think, I'd been hearing your name for a good couple months before we actually even spoke, because it was something that, Ebner was pretty excited about. And then I also worked a little bit with a couple of the students that Ebner had on programs and projects that they were trying to, do in his classes. And early this year, so I'm a Civic Spark Fellow for everyone who doesn't know me, working with the city of Antioch. And at the beginning of this service year for Civic Spark, I met with actually Tim Deloney and his group, who is at the same Tim, I'm assuming, that you're talking about. Yeah.
Same Tim.
And, he was talking about PilotCity, and, it'd been something that, after COVID started and some of our plans kind of got torn up a little bit, that was something that I started thinking about a little more. And then kind of coincidentally, Derek shot me a message while that was in the back of my mind, and it kind of just took off from there. So that's kind of the process from my perspective.
Yeah, I think after initially meeting you in that phone call, I was like, hey, we got to get City Antioch on board. There's some cool people in there in the environmental resources crew. And so I think we made you a video invite to be an employer in our program, right? And then you're like, hey, Derek, just watched the video. I think I'm not the right person for this, but I think I know the right people, right? And so then I think you sent out an email to Julie. So Julie, love to have you introduce yourself and your tenure. I don't know how, you seem like a veteran over at City of Antioch. So share more about yourself and your position over there.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Julie Haas-Wajdowicz, which is why most people just call me Julie because my last name is a pain to say. In fact, the mayor just referred to me on Saturday as Julie Haas and just didn't even bother with the rest of it. What I do is I'm the environmental resources coordinator for the city of Antioch. I'm the first environmental resources coordinator that the city has ever had. And I have been there over 20 years. So yeah, I have been, I get older every day. I used to say that I started this job when I was 12. And then I decided that after 20 years, I didn't want to say that I was 32. So I decided that I have now started this job when I was 5. So the job has grown a lot over the years, as you can imagine, with sustainability work in general. Things have changed in the last 20 years. When we first started, it was about our recycling programs and getting those up to par with the rest of the state. Recently, well, it hasn't even been that recently. We started taking on at least as much as I could try to do climate change and energy efficiency work in 2007. And but really last year, 2020, with the adoption of our climate action and resilience plan, which is our second community-wide climate action plan that we've had for the city of Antioch. It is definitely the 2.0 version of our original climate action plan. This one has a lot more opportunity to it and a lot more possibility, and actually some funding sources where our other one did not. And so, and we're now also focusing on not just greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but also adaptation to climate change and resiliency for our communities. And that's kind of what we're hoping to work on with Pilot City this year.
So you mentioned a bit about, because climate action plans, I think it has been, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think climate action plans have been implemented 15 years ago or so, probably, right? 10 to 20 years ago, sometime like that time frame, but really wasn't that big of a thing back then. And then almost every city, and I would say probably the area for sure, but also in the state and maybe even nationally, started formulating, and that's what spawned these kind of environmental coordinators or sustainability managers and all these different fronts. So walk us through some of the history of sustainability and climate action based departments and environmental resource type departments, in city governments. What's the history there, since you're really helped to lead the charge, I would say, right?
Well, I would say for starters that my view on local government is that we are here really to do the right thing, to lead by example, and to be the change that we want to see in the world, as Gandhi would say. And so I really believe that that's where we drive our sustainability actions from, is from being that leader, or at least trying to. It's always interesting, as you mentioned, that it's very popular now, but 20 years ago it wasn't. I would say that in our community, even a couple of years ago, it still wasn't. And so it's really about pushing that, about engaging the community to make everybody aware that it's all of our actions that'll lead us to future sustainability. It's not one sustainability coordinator making magic, which I'm not a magician. And so it's really a very long process. It started for us in Antioch with a lot of compliance with state laws, and mostly with state waste requirements. And it was actually the city's non-compliance with AB 939 that created my position, because they needed somebody that historically in local government, especially in smaller operations, your environmental work is kind of those other duties as assigned. And so you didn't, prior to my position, get somebody that had a real passion and a background in sustainability. And so they were just kind of, it was like another task they had to do. And so with the non-compliance of AB 939 for the city of Antioch, they created my position. And that was a solid waste requirement. But it wasn't, but I would imagine, I wasn't there yet, right? That the city didn't feel that solid waste alone was enough to warrant a full-time position. And so they made it an environmental resource coordinator position. And they wrote a job description that had water conservation, waste prevention, and stormwater in it, which is our pollution prevention programs. And that was what the positions, like duties and tasks was on those 3 areas. In 2007, we added climate change and energy efficiency to it, working with ICLEI, which is an international local government organization for sustainability, and started doing our greenhouse gas emissions inventories through that process. And then with the recession of 2009, we got our ARA stimulus funds for that through the Department of Energy to do our original climate action plan for the community-wide level, and then also do a huge streetlight retrofit project and a bunch of energy efficiency at city facilities. And so that really spurred our actions and our engagement in climate related topics. And then in 2020, actually 2019, we partnered with our housing consultants to work on our HUD funding, because HUD was requiring that in order to get federal funding, that the housing departments address resiliency in their communities. And so that's when we added the R to our CAP and became a CARP. And now it's our climate action and resilience plan. And the advantage of that is that it's tied to our 5-year CON plan, which is a 5-year plan for HUD funding and how we're going to go about doing those. And so there's a lot of opportunity to fund programs on energy efficiency, working with underserved populations and lower income populations in the city to make them more utility resilient, make them more, make them healthier, more vibrant communities, and lower their housing burdens. As we get hotter, we're going to deal with having higher energy bills. And so trying to make sure that our lower or our affordable housing is energy efficient. And so that's one of the things that we're working on, as well as over the last several years, the BCDC, which is a regional bay conservation district, worked on what's called adapting to rising tides. And originally that stopped at like Pittsburgh, for Ada. It stopped at you guys because you're the border for BCDC. We're in the Delta, you guys are in the Bay. So we took that, they extended that all the way through Contra Costa County. And now we have flood mapping tools that show us what our projected sea level rise is going to do in our community. And so we're trying to engage those neighborhoods in the discussion on how we address it. Or at least we hope to. That's what we're working on right now.
Wow. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think City of Antioch lucked out with having you lead the charge, because you talked about, people who, first of all, they were, the city seemed like there was, through AB, what was it? AB, yeah. Sorry, what was it again? AB 939, right? Well, it was really a compliance factor, and then they brought you in. So like, I think from my gut feeling, I don't know you incredibly well, but you have passion, it seems like, for this space. So what really sparked your interest in the space initially, and why, what piece of care do you have in this space specifically?
One thing I will say about that is people ask that, like, what I go, it's how I was raised. I'm a Bay Area native. I grew up in the East Bay. We spent a lot of time out camping and things, mostly because my parents were relatively, I mean, we were still like middle class, but my father was in construction as a heavy equipment operator, and my mother was a part-time social worker. So, you know, not a whole lot of funds rolling around there. So we spent a lot of time camping and learning that when we when we left a campsite, we always had to leave it cleaner than we found it. And then also just, I think especially my parents' generation, I used to joke when I was mad at my mom that her birth caused the Great Depression, but it was after that. But that there was a lot of resource conservation from a fiscal responsibility, and you didn't waste, and you recycled what you could, but you also just, you know, dealt with hand-me-downs and things. And hand-me-downs are way better than shopping because your mother can't tell you that you have to take it back. So especially if you have fashionable older friends. But anyhow, so it was just that is just how I grew up. And so for me, sustainability and living lightly on the planet is just a part of who I am. But then I also went to UC Santa Barbara, and I have a double major in economics and environmental studies. And so I backed that up with some schooling. And then I grew up, like I said, I'm a Bay Area native, and I think it's really hard to not be aware of sustainability in the wonderful community that we live in at large of the Bay Area, because it is a pretty enlightened community overall.
What hometown, or where are you from? What city?
I'm from Newark.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So just down the road from you, Derek.
That's right.
But I actually, way back when, Stop Waste was actually in San Leandro. So before I came to work for the city of Antioch, I worked for Stop Waste. And then before that, I worked for one of the haulers down in San Jose on outreach and education for recycling programs down there. But yeah.
Again, I think they're very lucky to be having you in this charge. And it's so interesting because you mentioned the cultural aspect of just being raised, you know, being conservative with your resources, right? Like same with me, you know, like my mom and dad came from like, you know, in Guangdong in China. They didn't have much. They reuse everything. You know, they're hoarders in an effective way, you know, like they're an optimized hoarder, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so
I hear you.
You know, like they compost because they compost, right? Like that they see a value in waste, right? In general, essentially. And so I think that's why I'm conservative in my resources too, is because I see my mom and dad as I was growing up, like reusing all these bottles and always putting stuff in their trash, and it's just a habit, right? That our family built, right? And then we in return kind of look at society and like, why are they not seeing an opportunity in that bottle over there? You know, why are they throwing it out, or why are they not doing? You know, like you start looking at other people and saying, something must be wrong if we're not, you know, optimizing our resources and waste, right? So, and that really goes well into our conversation of how do we change culture, right, in this space so that people are actually more, it's just a norm, right? It becomes such a norm that the culture dictates the behavioral change, right, of people being actually more willing to do these things because it was part of what we do as a community, right? Is we recycle, we buy cars that are EV, we do all the main stuff that we ask people to do, but we're also looking at opportunities, right, for waste. You also mentioned that you're not doing this because you're a magician, right? You're doing this because you care about it. And when you're in a city-based position, right, and looking to impact change on such a big mission that's global, right, you really literally can't do it yourself, and no one can, right? And so I think that's what I feel like the big myth, right? That people think is that, oh, let's hire someone to do that. Well, that only goes so far. If you're talking about global catastrophes, right, that you're trying to avoid. So here we are, you just kind of, looking to get help. And at some point you guys were like, hey, what's this program over here with the Civic Spark folks? What is this, right? So tell us about the Civic Spark partnership and this segue into Lorenzo's work. When did that come in?
So we have been working with a Civic Spark Fellow for, I have to count them. Lorenzo is our 5th/6th because he came back for a second year.
Yeah.
But so we've been working with Civic Spark for about 6 years. Civic Spark is the state application of the AmeriCorps program, which I usually explain as, it's like the domestic Peace Corps. Everybody knows about the Peace Corps. You go out and you build cool systems or whatever in some developing country. But you can also serve locally or domestically in AmeriCorps. We used to have an organization that was for Alameda and Contra Costa County that was called EBOO, East Bay Energy Watch. And they were funded through PG&E to work on with local governments on energy efficiency projects. And one of the things that we did with that budget was help subsidize Civic Spark Fellows, which was a great opportunity for local governments in Alameda and Contra Costa County to bring in some really young, bright, dedicated recent college grads. They could get some, it's a 11-month program in near poverty. They could get some really valuable local government experience, because I'll tell you, really hard to get a local government job.
Yep.
because one, the hiring process is really long and the benefits are great, and it's really hard to get rid of us. So to get them that experience and really understand what local government is, at the same time helping us build capacity on our climate work. So the objective is to not displace or substitute for full-time staff, but to increase our capacity at local government level to do work. And so we do a lot of special projects. Initially, our Civic Spark Fellows were doing things like our greenhouse gas emissions inventories. We've moved on, in my opinion, to probably the most meaningful program year that we've had, which was when Lorenzo wrote our entire climate action and resilience plan. So
that's a big one. That's a big one.
And is now on helping with a lot of other things. And I'll yield to Lorenzo to give a little bit more.
Yeah, tell us about your that big paper you wrote.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was certainly an interesting process, because going into the hiring piece of Civic Spark, the climate action and resilience plan was not initially in the scope. So I wasn't necessarily going into it expecting to write a climate action and resilience plan, but it turned out to be a really interesting project because, coming out of college, you have a bunch of research experience, you have, paper writing experience. I'm majored in history and in economics, so that's pretty much what I did over the course of 4 years. In this particular case with the CARP, the timeline was pretty quick. So I would say, it wasn't, the CARP wasn't as, how do I put this? I'll say the CARP wasn't as collaborative as I was hoping it to be, going into the project, because, and we'll get to this later when we're talking about, why we want, someone from PilotCity to come on and help us out with some outreach. But, we didn't do a ton to connect with all the Antioch communities. We had workshops, surveys here and there. But they weren't super targeted. It was, we'll just take what we can get at this point. Timeline's really crunched. We need to get it in, by the time the con plan gets submitted. So we're kind of rushing to get this done. But what I think the biggest value of the CARP was looking at what are the risks that we have going forward with climate change. So we, like Julie said, we added in the resilience piece of it, of climate work, and looking at the adaptation section of the plan, which is, after the executive summary, is the first major chunk of it. We're looking at how climate change is going to affect things like extreme heat and energy, how it's going to affect things like air quality in the city, what areas may be more at risk to future flooding. And there are a ton of resources out there that, helped us collect this information and collect the data. And the more we looked at it, the more we really had to think about, okay, this is something that we need to really start addressing now. We can't wait 10, 15 years before we start, thinking about how we're going to address extreme heat when energy bills are off the charts and people, are going to have to choose, okay, am I going to eat 3 meals today, eat 2 meals today, or am I going to cool down the house, cool down the apartment? So this is stuff that, we really have to take seriously. And that's kind of the impetus for pushing forward with better outreach in the implementation of the CARP, which is why we're here ultimately.
That's correct. And thanks for sharing that, very openly and frank. I think all cities are having issues around civic engagement for sustainability-based programs, trying to convince people to, pay for things that are a little more expensive by maybe a margin of 1 or 2% or whatnot, or maybe not, sometimes it's cheaper, 1 and 2% too. And we're asking them to take on more things that they have an option to do, right? And so there's this factor of, there's just all these blocks, right, to get to where we need to. And I think that's the grand obstacle, right, with climate action plans in general, within city governments, is a little city can't do it alone, and also, not to mention, we need to work over time to engage the community that typically are disengaged. Like, for example, back to my family, they don't raise their hands in where they came from. They weren't trained to be democratic. They weren't trained to go to a city council meeting and stand up and fight for their, rights around sustainability. There's all these cultures in our society, especially in the Bay Area, right, that are just living their life, like you're saying, like the example of, cool down or a couple, maybe an additional meal, right? Like that's a very real scenario, right? And so I'd like to share what our project is with students right now, so we can kind of dive deeper into that. So what we're asking students to do is to innovate the engagement in sustainability and housing programs with diverse and non-English speaking communities, particularly, right, within Antioch. In addition, I think not limited to, but focusing on those absolutely, right, by producing interactive face-to-face video forms using a tool that we've been discussing called Video Ask, a tool of Typeform, which is also one of our employers, by the way. And by using this kind of exploring the idea of using text-based, right, engagement to reach these community members, because it is the lowest hanging kind of fruit, right, for engagement. And also having consideration those that may have spotty internet, right, or no data plans, right. So Lorenzo, perhaps you can elaborate on the value of this statement, right, the value of the solutions that would come out of these parameters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, across the board, it's been hard for us, and I think we're not the only local government to, be experiencing this. With COVID, not being able to have that face-to-face interaction, to build that, trust in government to, get to know community members personally, and for them to get to know us working in government more personally. There's obviously been a schism there as a result of COVID. And, more generally with outreach, we're not going to be able to run, an in-person workshop, where we have some food for people to eat. They come in, we have little posters, they can vote for, what type of things they want to see. That's, we can do some sort of thing like that on Zoom, but that has its own issues, and takes a lot of staff time. So what we're looking at is trying to connect with people digitally through their phones. Video Ask, we think has value in that for a lot of non-English speaking populations, you can send them whatever you want. You can send them a text message. You can send them, you can post something on social media. That's not going to be something they're spending a lot of time looking at, scrolling through a bunch of stuff in English, obviously. Translation services are also, can be expensive. Sometimes, you can get someone in-house to do it. But even then, for a lot of community members, they don't really want to spend a lot of time scrolling through information. So with Video Ask, we can, have some students come up with some cool, interesting face-to-face exchanges for community members that, they can open on their phone and they can watch. And so they can spend maybe a minute or so watching this video rather than, looking at tiny print on a screen for 5 minutes, trying to figure out what the heck it's trying to say. And then they can respond to us as well. And then that's something we can take, case by case, look at, what the community members are saying and respond accordingly. And then, the Video Ask stuff isn't necessarily going to work for everybody. It's a tool in the toolbox for us to use. Other text messaging capabilities are also going to be very important for people who, like Derek said, may not have particularly good internet when they're not in the house with their phones. They may have a flip phone still, right? They don't have data plans. And we need to, reach them where they can be reached. And that's through, certain text messaging. If we want to do, alerts, program notifications, or even like really short one question surveys, because we don't want, we're not going to give someone a 15 question survey over text. That's not going to work for anybody involved. But, a quick yes or no question, is this something you would like to see? And then, if you want to connect with us further, here's where you can give us a call. You can send us a message here, etc. But the whole text messaging system is going to be really important for meeting people where they are, so that, it's not necessarily on them to go find all the resources that they need, because people have busy lives, and that's not viable for a lot of people. So we think there's a lot of value in that, between Video Ask and other text messaging capabilities, that we can kind of, reach people where they are. If they want to participate, great. If they don't, no sweat. But it'll help us, connect with people in the community and help at the very least, provide some awareness of like what we're doing and give us some inclination as to, what they're seeing and what they want to see going forward.
Thanks for elaborating on that. That's in very clear detail, right, of what the charge is here for students to develop these solutions. And we certainly went through a process of discovery of this particular area, right? And it just so happened that, we're like, hey, what about Video Ask? Kind of coming in as a solution set, right, as we kind of went down the road. But we went through this process through a series of meetings to discover, number one, that there's issues in engaging, there's challenges and obstacles, right, in engaging communities in communicating the opportunities, right, in sustainability and housing-based programs, right? and then getting them engaged to participate and take advantage of those opportunities, right? So it's just literally it's such a simple factor, but it must be the front end, right? The front end of engagement and receptivity or connection or the willingness to participate in the first place, type of scenario. So then this is where the community comes in, right? And we'll have Brian and Sri introduce himself in a little bit because they come from the city of Antioch. But and so we kind of went down this stream of like, okay, well, let's make it text message based, right? So that people are getting communication through a text, which we know everyone has, email, not so much, right? And even, mailers, yes, to some extent, right? In phone calls, too many robocalls nowadays, right? There's so many factors of how to even get to somebody. And then the pandemic, right? Can't go to groceries. You can't go to the local supermarket where, Antioch, city of Antioch government staff are waiting for you to give them fly or, whatever. There's no opportunities to connect, right? So this model of having a text-based system is kind of one factor. And then the second one is how can, when there is a pitch, right, from the city of Antioch to the community member, right, perhaps from any background, any cultural group, right, the ones who are typically disconnected, right, from those typical communications don't really know how to fill out a form even, right? Like there's too many words here, right, that I don't understand. There's too many boxes here that look really clunky. There's when they click on it, well, first they look at it and be like, what is this, right? I'm not even going to click it, right? That's one factor. And then another factor is when they click it, they look at it and they see this huge, clunky text thing. And then they scroll and then it's like a lot of them. They're like, and then they exit, right? I think that's my gut on what's happening, right? So by having a text system to get them where they're at, to have a simple link that gets shared to them through video ask, to be able to click on the link and then have a face pop up and say, with a video and audio saying, hey, in whether it's Cantonese or Spanish or, or the top languages of Antioch, right? It's like a kid or a student from the community or someone speaking that language saying, this is what we got for you. Do you want to join? Like that seems to not, again, as we discussed, not necessarily saying that this is a silver bullet scenario, right? But at least we're experimenting, right, and moving towards it. So I'm gonna we'll carry this conversation in a second, but let's have Brian and Tree introduce themselves. So Brian and Tree, we're having a conversation with City of Antioch. We're talking about the project that they have for Antioch students this year, which is to innovate the engagement in sustainability in housing programs with diverse non-English speaking communities of Antioch by producing interactive face-to-face video forms using Video Ask and by using text-based engagement to reach community members without consistent internet or smartphone access. Now, question for Brian and Tree here, and we as well, keeping us all from Antioch and also knowing you three to some extent. Your families and yourselves fit this model. You are coming from a diverse background that's non-English speaking, right? And also what's cool is that you all know what Video Ask is. So Brian, introduce yourself, Tree, introduce yourself, and share why you have interest in this particular project and this podcast today.
Hi, my name is Brian Bejarano. I am a sophomore at Antioch High School, and it interests me because I would want to learn a little more about it and, get to find out new things about it and, and also having to learn something that I haven't learned yet, and hopefully.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Tree?
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Siemann. I'm a sophomore at Antioch High. Why I'm interested in this is because I want to learn something new from Antioch, and then all my families are like, how would I say this? They are, uh, I would say English learner, because I want to use none of my parents know how to use technologies online. So I have to learn it myself. And I want to learn something new from you guys. And then maybe I use my experience and then teaches them so they can learn the technology that they need to use in life. That is all I got.
Pretty good. And that's highly relevant because that segues us into another potential experiment, right? Which is having young people be the ones that record the video, right? And pitch a particular program or programs that City of Antioch has around sustainability, climate, and housing, right? But then also the student who is promoting it perhaps to their own peers in their own schools locally, right? They can then be able to communicate those up to their parents and moms and dads and caretakers, right? So maybe Julie, you can share more about your thought process here. You know, how do you interpret these problem sets and these solutions?
Oh, wow, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that as you mentioned before, there is no silver bullet, and that this is that we need to really try to engage more of our community in this work, and that we're looking to do it with people that are in our community that we're trying to engage. So it's great to see you all here, and that it's a process, and it's probably going to be a continually evolving process. When we first envisioned this, not the Pilot City project per se, but just the outreach to the communities that, for instance, are going to be dealing with sea level rise, just as one issue. We envisioned being able to be like at local community groups and have face-to-face meetings, and we just don't know when we're going to be able to go back to that. And also, technology is a very big part of our lives, whether we have access to it or not. If we don't have access to the technology, it's a huge barrier to those residents to get the information, and we need to, in local government, work to eliminate that barrier and make sure that we have access for all. And so that's another aspect of what we're trying to do here, is find ways to communicate with all of our residents with the tools and availability that they have. Additionally, we live in a community where people have to commute to their jobs when they're open, and so that's a huge barrier on how much time people have, which is why we want things to be quick and easy for them. And then the other thing that I would mention in general as far as processes is, if we want to look at things and be able to provide technical assistance, there are already a lot of really good programs out there for assisting, let's say, in like energy efficiency. But like you mentioned, Derek, you start to look at the forms and it's just hard. And so you quit. And so we're hoping to be able to provide some actual assistance in getting the assistance, for residents. And hopefully be able to develop that more as well through this. I think a lot of it, I kind of circle back to Lorenzo's story about how when he first applied for Civic Spark and everything, that the CARP wasn't in our scope. It was in the scope when he came in to interview. So he did know going in, but so much changed, between those things. And so where in general, you'll find that local government is fairly unflexible. In our programs, we really roll with it. And so things might change throughout our process. As we learn more, we have to adjust. And so that's kind of what I expect out of the process, is I have very little expectation.
Yeah. You know, for sure. And let's go on this expectation journey here, okay? Because I think that will give students a really good understanding of what we're imagining for them as this experiment, right? So I'll take a first stab at it, okay? So what we're expecting students from Antioch and perhaps even neighboring students, you know, who are in the program or those who are interested in Antioch, is to research and understand the programs first, right, of City of Antioch. I think that's number one, right? Understand what the city has to offer in terms of these programs that they would like to offer to citizens and residents of the community, right? When those are all kind of understood and broken down in a way that that student understands and see the opportunities of, they can now start to plan and design and strategize how they want to engage the community about these programs, right? So they can have an effective communication of the opportunity to the citizens and residents, right? Who could take advantage of the program. And maybe there's some data analysis of the types of citizens that might be good, or maybe there's particular community or neighborhoods that'll be best for it, or you know, maybe some people are around the, I don't know if you said a creek over there, but you know, someone's around the creek and then there's an opportunity around those residents, right? So understand the opportunity. And then what the mission of the student is to understand, plan, and design, and open up an account, right, on VideoAsk, right? Free account on videoask.com, a product of one of our employers, Typeform. And they would click, when they log in, click on New VideoAsk, right? And then they would ask them to record their initial video question that they want to ask the citizen or resident who could benefit from the opportunity about a particular program, right? One program, right? Or part of a program, so that they can record it in their version, how they would ask or pitch it to the resident in their language, ideally, right? That they represent. So I don't know what you necessarily speak, but I speak Cantonese, right? So I would speak Cantonese in this video. Or English if you speak English, right? And then you're essentially asking people in your cultural group about these, tell them about these programs and see if they want to participate. And then that's the question in the video form, right? Video ask, and then that's a prototype. And then maybe you have to then select the response you want from the actual citizen or resident. So maybe it's a response through video. Maybe you want to engage with them in that level, right? So maybe they're pulling up and click on record and say, and there may be, you know, actually responding in Cantonese or Spanish or, you know, or something like that. And then, and I was talking to Lorenzo, the only thing you just have to be worried about is too much content coming in, they have to review, right? But even in getting engagement with these populations, I think is exciting, right? So maybe you're getting responses in Cantonese back or Spanish, something like that, right? And then you got to have an interpreter to kind of translate what they're saying. And that's the response for them to commit. They're saying yes, like, you know, in their own respective language. And then that's it, you know, and then they enter maybe their name and email and then boom, right? That's one entry, one citizen or resident in the bucket, you know. And then now the idea is to communicate other programs that the student may have interest in who's developing this project, right, to engage. And then at some point, we'll build an infrastructure with the city kind of on a more ad hoc level where we're building as like a tech system perhaps, and then you're building an aggregate of mobile numbers that you're sending out these video forms to then collect, and over time collect mobile phone numbers you can solicit these opportunities to, right? And what's cool about Video Ask, because I'm a big fan, if you haven't noticed already, is that you don't have to just collect videos, right? You record a video to ask the person clicking on the form, right, to respond to, but you don't have to collect the video from the person respond to the form. You can collect multiple choice, you can collect text answers, you can collect audio only answers. You can have them even use like integrations with a Calendly to schedule things with you, like events, or schedule a meeting, or like a one-on-one session or something like that. So there's a variety of ways you can collect responses from the actual resident or community member. But the more important thing is that when the resident gets that text, clicks on the Video Ask link, they pop up on their phone or computer, a person telling them like a video, an audio of someone telling you about that program, and then they understand it, right? And it's engaging, it's interactive, it's experiential. And then when they know that opportunity, then that hopefully the ideas that they're encouraged, right, to apply or go for that opportunity, right? So I wanted to elaborate on that because I just wanted to get that on my head so that students know clearly what's being asked of them, right? And Lorenzo, anything I missed there? Anything you'd like to add there? Anything that you'd like to edit in that?
Yeah, there's a couple things to supplement what you were saying. So for that first piece of the project, where they're doing some program research and all that stuff, I would say, don't hesitate to reach out to us because we're obviously going to be starting. I mean, Julian more so than I am, but with the knowledge of what kind of programs are available in the city within, the different topics, whether it's, energy efficiency, cooling centers that we have in the city for a hot day. Don't hesitate to reach out to us because that's information that we have. So you don't need to spend, hours on end doing research on that when, you can send us an email like, hey, what kinds of programs are you helping out with, in terms of energy efficiency? And that's something that we can, send over to you so that you're not starting fully from scratch. The second thing is in terms of and this is a little bit, down the pipeline, but when we're collecting, phone numbers so that we can reach out to people directly, we have a few community organizations that we have, good relationships with that may be able to help us in that process. So, you may have, just keep in mind that you may have some personal interaction with people that are running some community organizations on those kind of topics. And, you're not going to be expected to, start those relationships, right? So you're going to be working within the context of relationships that, we've already built with these organizations. And I think I may have had one more thing, but it's slipped my mind. But I think those are the two big things that I just wanted to be clear on. And I guess I will say a third thing that I'm going to be, for the next few months, working pretty heavily on engagement. So I'm going to be available for, any student that has any questions, that needs any support. I'll be there to help them, through the process. If, you come up with something that's, kind of a stumper. So just wanted to put that out there so that it's not, we're not trying to send you out on your own to, fix engagement in Antioch. And we'll be here to support you. And specifically, I'll be here to support you because, I'll be working on engagement stuff at the same time that you are.
And maybe what we can get started more so on with the engagement is having you help our program engage students, right, in Antioch to do this program, to build these projects that they can then help you with engagement, right? So maybe that's how we get started. So that way we can go to Antioch High School, go to Deer Valley, go to, there's a lot of high schools in Antioch, but there's two I'm missing, I think.
Is the other, what you would say traditional high school, and then there's two continuation or alternative ed schools. There's Live Oak and there's Prospects.
That's right. Sorry, there's five. I have 5 high schools, I believe.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can do together with City of Antioch is to engage students to do this program and this project so that they can help and reciprocate on developing solutions, right? To then come back to you with ideas and engagements. And then we can certainly do some customized engagements with the students who are in our program, meanwhile, at least in 2021 during this period of time, right? This window of time between February 26th, May 23rd to engage. And I think we've actually covered a lot here, a lot of context, a lot of background, a lot of intent, a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities, right? So, and I'm sure that the co-host here has some questions about maybe some details, maybe some vision items, maybe, I don't know, some curiosities. So I'd like to hand over the mic to the co-hosts here. Ada, do you have any particular questions?
Yeah. So I was wondering, are you strictly looking at video asks / like automated messages, or are you also open to other communication applications as well?
I would say we're completely open, in my opinion, to whatever. I mean, we haven't tried to do this before, so we don't necessarily have a preconceived notion of what we should be doing.
Yeah, and I just add on, I mean, it would be, I mean, we do want to set up some sort of text messaging system, but like Julie said, we don't have, we're not like stuck in a certain specific vision for, you know, how we want it to play out. This is, you know, an experimental pilot, if you will, project for us. So we're welcome to, you know, any sort of creative solution, and yeah, planning to try that out.
So when will you start to introduce this to high schools or schools in Antioch?
That'd be a question for me, I think. So February 26, 2021 is when we're anticipating launch of our programs. And Lorenzo now knows the charge around making some videos, some vlogs, and we're going to have some links and resources collected. So we're doing program setup with City of Antioch right now, and the podcast is part of it. So very soon, and probably within the next month, we'll have a full accessibility to this program that students can access. And we would love to have the Antiochers here help us promote to the Antiochers. And I'm sure, Ada, you have some friends over in Antioch too, so maybe you can help us promote as well. So February 26th tentatively, but we're a little delayed on our software, which is why I hesitate a little bit. But February 26th-ish. Any additional questions, Ada? Feel free to just spitfire.
I would like to know how this. Oh, sure, you can
go for it, Brian.
Oh, okay. I would like to know how this would benefit for the students and for the teachers, if it was possible, so they can
learn. So I will say that one of the things, especially coming from, you know, Antioch's work-based learning approach to high school education, this is a really good practical application of whether you're in the environmental programs or the media tech, or, you know, I'm just thinking about the specifically Antioch High Academies, because those are the ones I'm more familiar with. It's a real world application of your skills, and will show you your career opportunities in local government. Also, real quick, I'll say, in case you haven't, I've been putting in a whole bunch of resources in the chat. So if anybody wants them.
Thank you.
As well as else. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I have one question. I'm not sure if you guys covered this before, but how long have you guys been working on this video ask thing?
Well, the video ask thing specifically is pretty new, because we kind of had to pivot a little bit when COVID hit, and so we've been, you know, in a process of trying to create like a new sort of community engagement guide, community engagement plan. And, you know, we weren't even really familiar with video ask until, you know, we chatted with Derek, and he kind of showed us what kind of things I could do. And, you know, obviously we were interested in it because it can be a lot easier for people to interact with. But we don't have, you know, a strong, you know, idea other than, you know, for me personally, doing some of the vlogs here for Derek, I've personally never used Video Ask. So it's going to be a very like experimental thing for us to go through and see, you know, okay, if we run this program out, if we're connecting with people through Video Ask, is this something that people are responding well to? There are reasons why we think people might respond well. And this is kind of our way of figuring out, okay, is what we think is going to happen, is that actually going to happen when we run it out? So that's kind of where we're at with that. And, you know, we can also, for whatever students that decide to jump on this project, I'm willing to talk about, you know, how Video Ask and, you know, the text messaging outreach and engagement fits into our kind of broader community engagement plan. But that's a long conversation, and that's one that, you know, we don't have time for today, but whatever student decides to sign up, that's a conversation that I think could be rewarding for the student. I don't know, that got a little rambly, but I hope it answered your question.
Got it.
I just have one more question. I know that Antioch and Pittsburgh also, they're both very diverse communities. Are there any languages other than English that you're anticipating students to include in their Video Ask?
Yeah. So, I mean, Spanish is a big one in Antioch. And it really depends on, you know, the capacity of the students. Like, we're not expecting students to come in and, you know 6 languages. But if we're to choose, you know, a couple languages that are pretty heavily spoken in Antioch, like Spanish is the big one. And then we also have Tagalog, which is also, we have a decent subset of the population that speaks Tagalog. And then probably Mandarin. But then, you know, Vietnamese is also one. It's hard to, you know, tell students, well, you need to speak 6 languages to take this program on. So, you know, if any student who speaks a couple languages, whether it's, you know, Spanish, whether it's, you know, an East Asian language, Southeast Asian language, I mean, we're willing to work with you and whatever capabilities you have.
I mean, any language besides English is going to be more than we already have.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to be reaching more community members than we're currently reaching with only English. You know, we do, especially in the housing programs, we do some Spanish, but when you're looking at things across the board for what languages Antioch puts stuff out in, it's just English right now, and it's a big gap.
This is a very important topic, so I'm going to just, and this podcast is a required watch when students are in your program, so they're going to watch this, right? Theoretically. And so I want to share perhaps a recommendation, right, to City of Antioch. I would say for students who are watching this right now who are anticipating joining or are joined already, if you speak English, that's totally fine, right? Keep doing the project. But if you speak another language at all besides English, do that language, right? For the Video Ask. That way you're utilizing you're able to engage, even if it's a niche population, right? Of 10 people, you know, in the community. That's good. That's pretty good, right? But you know, if and then there's populations that are, you know, 100 people, 150 people, you know, 1,000 people, you know, 10,000 people, 20,000, you know, I think you just get the point. I think the key here is how do we saturate the engagement with as many populations as possible that speak a variety of languages. So if you speak English, great, keep building the project, right? And if you speak any language besides English, use that language as your Video Ask language, right? That you're engaging your population on, or those cultural groups. So what do you think about that, Julie, Lorenzo? I don't know if you just...
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Cool. I know our program well at this point, so.
I would.
And I think I saw someone unmute. Any other questions from the co-hosts here. Great questions, by the way. Very helpful for the students who are watching this. All right. I don't know where Tim Deloney is. Where's Tim Deloney? I thought he was supposed to. He said he was. I think he had office
Looking
hours.
forward to seeing him.
I know. I was like, where is he? But I think you guys all know him. Everyone here, I think, knows him for the most part. Maybe Ada a little bit. And Julie, I think you also have a kid over in Antioch High School as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Did any of our Antioch High kids recognize part of my last name? My daughter's a junior in the Edge Academy and in biotech. Her name's Gaia. So.
Any ring a bell?
And then some of you guys are sophomores, so I know Zach White, who's also a sophomore in Edge.
That's right.
Trying to think of anybody else that's still on campus that I know over there these days.
Cool. Well, I think that's going to be very helpful to get some inroads from your angles, right, Julie, as well, to get students from Antioch to be part of this program. So I think we're pretty much we're good here. We've covered a lot of ground. I think I will pass the last torch over to Lorenzo to communicate any particular last thoughts that you'd like to offer to students. And they're going to watch this when they're in the program. So any parting advice for them to go on their journey is helpful. And then maybe, Julie, you can offer your parting advice thereafter, perhaps.
Yeah. So I think obviously we've covered a lot of territory in this, in this chat. And, Julie's put in a bunch of resources into the chat that we have here. And despite all that, I will say, my advice would be, don't be intimidated by this process. We're also starting out, this is something that's going to be experimental to us. We're not necessarily expecting everything we do to have, 100% success rate. And, just if you want to join us in this journey, then it'll be a collaborative environment, and one that we'll meet you where you are, and we'll work with your creativity, work with your ideas, because that's the whole point of this. We're not super interested in having the students follow a very rigid set of rules. So you'll have some freedom, and you'll also have some support from our end to kind of do what you want to do, and reach the communities you think need to be reached with some of these programs. And that's obviously very important because, what we're hoping is that the students that we're working with are going to be, people who go to school in Antioch, live in Antioch. So, they know the communities better than we do, or at least me. I don't live in Antioch. So we'll have open ears, open minds with whoever comes in, and we'll both be learning stuff at the same time. So that's what I got for everybody, and it's really exciting on our end, and it's an opportunity. Like I said, like Brian's been saying this whole time, it's an opportunity to learn, and we'll all be learning.
And I would definitely follow that up with, in my opinion, I'm like the subject matter expert on what programs we have available, what we can and can't do. But you guys are the creative experts and the creative minds, and also the community experts. I've lived here, but I haven't lived with all 114,000 of our residents and all of those community groups that that makes Antioch. So we are definitely looking to learn from all of you and to take your recommendations.
We'll have Julie and Lorenzo stick around, and if you all would like to hang out and just kind of see behind the scenes a little bit, feel free to stick around as well. Thank you all.